did during his short, brutish career. This emphasis on Blackbeard's appearance and personality hides the fact that the man was a highly successful pirate. Although his career as an independent pirate captain lasted less than a year and a half, his actions shook the very foundations of British rule in colonial America. While he was operating in the Caribbean, Blackbeard was little more than a major irritant, one of several pirate captains who fought their own private war among the islands and shoals of the West Indies. However, his blockade of Charleston, was something different. His actions paralyzed the port, bringing maritime trade to a halt. While this caused a crisis in the colony of South Carolina, Blackbeard's blockade had an equally dramatic impact further up the coast. At the time, Blackbeard commanded several ships and several hundred men. With a force like that at his disposal, he could repeat his success off Charleston anywhere else along North America's Atlantic seaboard. For a brief period, he became America's bogeyman, and nobody knew where he would strike next. Although the crisis passed, the rulers and merchants of colonial America weren't going to forget Blackbeard in a hurry. Until his death, he remained a nascent threat, the one man they knew who could bring their fragile colonial economy to its knees. This all took place in 1718, the year that represented the peak of piratical activity in the Americas. It also represented a turning point, the great upsurge of piracy following the end of the War of the Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1713, between Britain, France, and Spain reached its peak during Blackbeard's time, and afterward the threat diminished, as the few pirates who remained left American waters for fresh hunting grounds on the far side of the world. Indeed, the so-called Golden Age of Piracy, a phrase first conjured up by Captain Johnson in 1724, was meant to encompass the period from about 1697, when the last of the buccaneers ended their attacks on the Spanish, to around 1726, when the last mass hanging of pirates took place. In fact, the peak of piratical activity was concentrated in a far shorter period. From 1713, when the War of the Spanish Succession ended, until 1722, when the crew of Bartholomew Roberts was hanged en masse on the West African coast. In the waters of colonial America, the worst phase lasted from 1716 until 1720, a period that saw the development of the Bahamas as a pirate stronghold, then the establishment of British rule in the islands, and the subsequent eradication of Bahamian piracy. Blackbeard was very much one of these Bahamian pirates, even though he quit the islands in 1717 when they were at their peak as a pirate haven and never returned. The story of Blackbeard, therefore, mirrors the story of this pirate crisis. The idea behind this book is to seek out the real man behind this dramatic facade, and to try to understand why he took to piracy, how he managed to excel as a leader of cutthroats, and why his piratical career reached such a spectacular and blood-soaked finale. For someone like Blackbeard, a conventional historical narrative isn't really enough. The life he led and the world he lived in were too different from our own for that. In order to understand Blackbeard the pirate, we need to become conversant with Blackbeard's profession and the role piracy played in the era he lived in. What I have done is to intersperse chapters of narrative history with others that delve a little deeper into the maritime world Blackbeard lived in, allowing readers to become conversant with such things as pirate havens, how pirates operated, how they structured their crews, and what impact they had on colonial America. I hope you find the result as much fun to read as it was to research and write. A Date with History. Diary writers in Blackbeard's day must have been a little confused, as two types of calendars were being used at the same time. The older Julian calendar, supposedly named after its Caesarian inventor, began its year on March 25 and counted every fourth year as a leap year. Over the centuries, this led to a discrepancy between the calendar and the seasons, losing one day every 128 years. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII solved the problem by leaving out a leap year at the end of 3 out of every 4 centuries, which, amazingly enough, was all it took to bring the calendar and tropical year back into line. The new year was now celebrated on January 1st. The Gregorian, or New Style calendar, was rapidly adopted by most European countries, and by association it was adopted in their American colonies as well. Britain remained the exception, much as it does today.